It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. And today's guest is Dinalynn Rosenbush. She's actually a speech and language pathologist. And she also has a podcast called The Language of Play, which we did a little interview. I see you, Dinalynn. Great. Anyway, about kids with special needs as well. And so today we want to talk about security in the turbulence and how to help your special needs kids and kids in general get through the difficulties of high conflict separation. So, I don't know why she's not popping on. Let me try it again. But anyway, we met just a couple of months ago, and I love having like experts in speech and language pathology and behavioral analysis and people who do things that are like completely different from what I do, because they really can shed some light on different things that affect this community that certainly I don't know about. Anyway, I'm not sure why she can't get on here, but if I can't, let me try it one more time. All right, let's see, Dina, if this works. No. All right, I'm going to start it. Oh, here she is. Hi, that worked. I was like, what's going on? Let me.
Yes.
So glad to see you and glad this is working. So Dinalynn, before we even get started, how common is it for kids to have, this is kind of a rhetorical question, for kids to have a really difficult time, even if their parents are trying to shield them from it in the midst of like a difficult divorce? I know you have experience personally as well.
Yes, of course. The children will definitely have a traumatic response. They will definitely have a fear of what's going on. You know, they don't know. There's a lot of emotions as they figure it out. And so even when parents try to shield them, kiddos, they worry, they wonder. They don't know, you know, depending on their age, they think it might be their fault. So there are lots of things we need to do for our children, even if we're trying to shield them, even if we think that they're doing fine. There's a lot we can do to help them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that the kids don't really know if you don't talk about it in front of them.
Right, right. And that certainly is a mistake, because even your energy level changes. Not just the energy that you have to play, but you know as well as I do that when you went through a high conflict divorce, there's like this undercurrent of anxiety all the
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
kids feel that. And they
Yeah.
don't know how to process. They don't know how to understand. And then there's the very real aspect of, oh, dad or mom was present in the house and now they're not. So that's a very real thing that you need to talk with them about. And then if there is the experience where mom or dad are coming and going, and then we think that maybe we're arguing away from the kids, but they can hear you in the other room.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know, well, what's going on? And
Yeah.
kids tend to think more in black and white, who's right, who's wrong.
That's
But
really
yet
important to think about.
it is, because we don't want to let our kids think that a part of them is also wrong, because they themselves view themselves as part mom, part dad. And so if we're going to be doing a wrongness and a badness on the parent that is not behaving well, we still are telling our child inadvertently, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are lots of ways to approach this, lots of ways to talk about it, but we have to be careful, and we have to be intentional.
Yeah. So before I'm thrilled that we're going to talk about this, but before we even get into it, can you introduce yourself formally?
Yes. Sorry, didn't do that. Okay, so yes, I am Dinalynn Rosenbush, and I'm a speech language pathologist. I've worked in the schools for 30 years, and then I resigned that position, and now I have a podcast titled The Language of Play, and I have a coaching business too to help parents struggling to communicate for whatever reason. And I help parents learn how to teach their kiddos at home. Now you're pixelated, and I'm wondering if I've lost you.
No, you were pixelated a minute ago, and I thought the same thing. No, but I can
Okay.
see and hear you just fine.
Okay. So yeah, so a few years ago, I decided to do my own business, and it is super fun watching families transform. And so that's what I'm doing now. Speaking,
Yeah.
writing. Yeah.
So helpful. So So what are some of the differences you see when a family is separating between kids with special needs who can't maybe communicate as well, and then kids who, I don't even know what label to use, who don't have special needs
Right.
or disabilities?
So, okay, so it, this is highly variable. You know, like when you say special needs, you have a gamut of possibility of what we're talking about. Some of those kiddos, uh, maybe they've got ADHD that is out of control,
Mm,
but
that's
yet
super
they're
common here.
brilliant. Okay, right, I would imagine. And they might still be brilliant, but yet they might be in the category of special needs because of that motor that's in them that has to be managed in a different way. And you've got that all the way to the profound disability where a child is, you know, not speaking, not walking, not talking, and tube fed. You know, you've got a huge gamut of what might be going on. And so I can't speak to like what's it like for kiddos with disabilities because they're all different. And if you think about kiddos that are not having disabilities, well, we all have, I like to think of it more as differently abled because even kiddos that haven't been identified with disability, they've got strengths and weaknesses that impact how they relate and how they understand. And the relationship that they have with their parents is going to be different than my relationship or your relationship. And with mom is different than with dad. So there's this undercurrent that we have to remember, that you've got the relationship, but you've also got the different strengths and weaknesses. So having caveated all of that at the beginning to say that when we are looking at kiddos who are able to communicate very well versus kiddos that are unable to communicate very well, um, when we're talking to our kiddos that don't have these strong traits of being able to, not traits, skills of being able to communicate, we need to think about how we can go into picture and how we can go into body and how we can show them and tell them without, in a sense, without words. And so then we have to be intentional. What is it that we really want to teach them? And so toys are huge. And I will say, even our kids that are typically abled, if you're talking about a young child, this kind of method works very well too. When we try to teach our kids without using as much in the words, then we can pull back and we can talk to their heart and their emotions. So then parents are thinking, what in the world does that mean?
No, I'm thinking this sounds fascinating. And like, I'm wondering, for example, if you are getting ready to separate from your partner, how do you tell a child, let's say a young child, without using words?
Yeah,
Can you do that as an example? Like what,
I can. So I'll
I mean,
take
it
a
sounds
couple of
really
things.
interesting. I think about play therapy and art therapy.
Exactly, exactly. Now, because excuse me, because we're on Instagram and I have just a little window here, I'm looking at what's in front of me to use, and I've got my little markers. Okay.
Yeah.
So what, you know, for an example, what we can do is we can use a toy. Maybe it's going to be dolls, stuffed animals, trucks. It doesn't really matter. I'm only in a little window, so I've grabbed these markers or highlighters. So anyway, and when you tell, there are some things we tell matter of fact without emotion. And so the part that's going to be told without emotion, let's say the yellow person here is going to be the parent that stays with the children. And maybe we're going to have two children and then we're going to have another parent. Okay. So we're going to say, oh, look, here's how it's going to be. And maybe draw a picture of this house and then have another house for this person. And
Mhm.
then the kids will go over here and the kids will go over here. And you just show them and let them walk their stuffed animals, their trucks, whatever, so that the kids know that it's okay. And then when they see you happy and
Mhm.
positive about, you get to, not you have to go visit them, and then you would get to come back again. You know, like
Yeah.
there's ways we can say it, isn't there?
Yeah.
That we're
Wow.
really telling the undercurrent. What is it that we're actually teaching our kids? Because if they are language impaired, if they are lower language, they are picking up a lot on the cues of your emotions and what you present outside of words. And that's what they're actually learning.
You
The
know,
words might
Dinalynn,
not
as
make
you're
sense
saying
to them.
that, Dinalynn, there's a rule we often talk about. It's called the 738 55% rule, and it says that people only actually pay attention to 7% of your words, 38% to your tone, and 57 to your body language.
Okay, that's
Or
exactly
55,
then what
sorry if
we're
I got
leaning
my math
into.
wrong.
Yeah. I've heard statistics like that, and I never remember what the numbers actually are. But I
Yeah, but
do know that words is always lower. And
yeah.
so the words clarify, the words help. But you got to remember to use some items and your body and your energy, your heart in it, and to use words like that are power words like you get to instead
Mm.
of you have to. And so that you can make the experience for the kids not be fearful, because the kids are already going to naturally be, and I've been divorced, I get this, it's really scary. And so if they can be in this state that is, if you can, let me rephrase that, if you can bring them out of the state of fear that is going to be within them, wondering what's happening, and you bring them to a place of confidence with your confidence
And clarity, really.
and clarity with the words help with clarity, the pictures of how are they moving and everything's going to be okay. That's clarity as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is such a, like, as you're talking with these markers in front of you, I'm thinking about how when someone gives a presentation and they have a prop, we look at the prop. We
Exactly.
don't look at the person as much. And so it is like a good distraction to be like, this is how this is going to be, and this is how that's going to be without emotion. And so I'm focusing on that. And
Right.
also going back and forth with my eyes is making me think of EMDR, which is
Mm-hmm.
calming,
It is.
that
Yes.
bilateral movement.
Okay, so you know about that. That's great. That is a thing. I'm not an expert in that bilateral movement, but I do know that when you have things that you're going back and forth with, a tennis match,
Uh-huh.
there is some kind of calming, especially, and this is what I'm understanding, is if your face is in one place, you're not actually turning your head like this, but your face is in one place and your eyes are doing the work. And that seems to be calming to the nervous system. I
Right,
do
like
not understand
EMDR.
this. It is, yeah, 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 exactly.
Wow.
There is something that I would like to lean into too, um, that was powerful for me when my kids were small and the divorce was new, and my kids were not language impaired. I did deal with ADHD, um, but they were like just full of anxiety when they would leave, and then when they would, and not as much when they leave, but when they'd return. It
Mm-hmm.
was it was like they were a bundle of nerves, but they were crying, and they would lay on the floor and they'd writhe like they were in pain. And I thought, what do I do with these kids that were just writhing? And that's the
Like
only word I
when
have.
they came back to you.
Yes, yes. And I think that, like they went and they visited, and then when they came back, it was that ripping away from their dad feeling, I think. Like
Mm.
there's this feeling inside of them, and they would just cry and cry and cry. So I thought, well, what can I do to help them? And then somebody said, get them in the bath. And it was the most genius thing. We had this big tub, and so I filled the tub. Everybody got swimsuits on. And so I learned that every day for, it must have been 3, 4 months, every day that they would return, I would have bath water drawn, swimsuits out, and I said, no talking until we're in the tub. And we would all be cozied up in the tub, but but then they would play with water, and I wouldn't be the first one to speak. I wouldn't say much, and there'd be toys in the tub, and so we'd dump and pour, and they would just have that water, and the water has tremendous power to dissipate some of that anxious energy. And then after a little while of being in the water, they started talking. And as long as I kept mostly quiet and just saying things like, oh, tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, tell me more. That's interesting. Tell me more. And not being like, what was really going on inside of me is like, the anger myself of, oh, you got to do that fun stuff. Why did you get, like thinking down those lines, or, oh, that was dangerous. What, you shouldn't have, like there was all this going on inside of
Or
me.
even, are you okay? Are you okay?
All of that, wanting to call, wanting to check on, wanting to, like my brain and my heart were all over the place. So that water was actually helpful for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I breathe, and I actually had to script my words. Like before they came home, I wrote those phrases I just said on the counter. Tell me more. That's interesting. Sounds nice. those kind of words. So I wrote it and I thought it, and I had myself kind of like a cue card in my memory because I had practiced before they got home in order to get in the right brain space. And then when I was in the water with them too, then I was able to say all those things. When they go to bed later on that night, I call my best friend.
Mhm.
And I'd go outside or leave the house or sit inside my car outside so that there was no possibility of them overhearing me. So water's a huge thing that can help kids in the adjustment, and that's whether or not they have any kind of communication disorder delay.
That
So
is
in the line of
amazing. I've
work,
never heard this before, Dina, and I've interviewed hundreds of people, but I've never heard this. I've heard about obviously the dysregulation when kids come home, talking about maybe doing something that involves bilateral movement, like taking a walk, um,
Mhm.
sitting next to each other rather than across each other. But I've never heard anything about water, which I love. I mean, just as a total side note, my daughter was a water baby. She was born at home and in the water. And so water is very soothing and it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it does. It was genius that somebody said that to me, and it was so effective. And so, yes, it's something that I say to all parents that are going through a divorce that have especially young children. When you've got older kids and you can't all fit in the tub.
Yeah, I was
um,
going to say, how big is the tub though?
bilateral movement, all those things that you say that are common teachings. Yes, they are good, they are helpful, they are right. And the trickiest and most powerful thing you do is, again, what are you actually saying? How are you actually reacting when you hear about the good things that happened and how much they love the other parent and you're angry?
Mm,
What do you actually exude? That's the
yeah,
thing. And then when you hear about things that you disagree with, what do you actually say and what do you actually exude? And when
yeah,
you think about things that are scary, same thing. What do you actually say and what do you actually exude? So that intentionality is powerful. Getting back to the water, I want to say three more things that are, I think, not quite equally as powerful, but they are. And that would be wind. So if you get out in the wind, depending where you live, that might be more accessible than water. Or if you have sand, to play in the sand, to the textures, and that just like we know that sand table can be something that's soothing and calming, but heck, we even have like labyrinth kind of sand tables that
uh-huh.
adults play with as calming things. Well, the texture of sand is a good thing for your kiddos. You don't need anything formal like a sand table. You just need the sandbox and go out there and play with them. And it can be a small sandbox, something to just to play with. And then the fourth thing is the idea of hot and cold. So temperature. So wind, temperature change. So maybe you're going to give them something very cold to drink, or maybe you're going to step outside in the wintertime and put feet in the snow for a little bit.
Mhm.
Not any of this long, of course, if it's cold or hot, but yet there are ways that temperature can like just kind of shake us up all of a sudden to think
Mhm.
about something else, particularly cold, and it can stop us when we are in a chaotic space. So, like with my grandchildren, when they just have a meltdown, they're overdone, they're overtired, they've eaten poorly, it's the holidays, and they just kind of start screaming. Um, to walk them outside, they've got wind, got a little bit of snow, put snow in their hands.
Mhm.
That's enough cold to totally distract them from being in a meltdown so that they can regain some of that regulation. So I like to use those kind of things too, cold and hot. So temperature changes, wind is the same effect, but
Mhm.
obviously you're kind of at the mercy of the weather with that one. And then, or fan, whatever. But then water is so powerful. And I forgot the third one I said. Oh, fan.
Wind, sand, temperature, water.
Yes. So those are things that are really practical that you can do during that transition time. And then as far as communication and language, using objects, items to represent what you're actually trying to teach them
Oh
and
my
keeping
gosh,
it
I
matter of
love this.
fact.
I interviewed a woman named Dr. Rebecca Vasquez who loves neurobiology. She's a professor at Rutgers University, and she said some of the same things, but not in terms of communicating with your kids, but in terms of regulating yourself when you're dealing with sport stuff. She said about temperature. She didn't say sand or wind, but the water thing and the temperature in terms of
Okay.
kind of distracting yourself. So
Yeah.
so interesting. Wow. Well, thank you. I know we're at time. Thank you so much, Dinalynn. How can people find you? And I know you have like a little freebie giveaway thing too.
Oh, I do. Thank you for reminding me. I had forgotten in this moment.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a freebie, which is an email. It's a 6 email sequence, and it is 5 ways to get your kids to listen better. And that also leans into the concept. It was written with ADHD in mind.
Oh,
But
perfect.
what kinds of things can we do with our kiddos that will help them to be able to listen, particularly when they're not able to? And that certainly is pertinent in divorce, and it's any age. And what I find funny is that when I teach these strategies to parents, inevitably somebody says to me, I tried it with my spouse and it worked. And I'm like, uh-huh,
It
this
makes
is
sense.
human. Yeah, it's human, kind of like what you said, that this person was using wind and or water and texture and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's human. It helps all of us. And so how people can get a hold of me, you asked, was I am at the language of play. My email is hello@thelanguageofplay.com. My podcast is The Language of Play. There you go.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This is actually so fascinating. I love when I learn something really different, and I wasn't expecting like those particular strategies. And I'm going to recommend you and recommend these techniques with our clients. So I really appreciate this.
Great. Well, you said you wanted something practical that parents could do right now. So I thought I like this one myself.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, let's definitely stay in touch and do another one of these.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Lisa. Bye.
Take care. Bye.